Is on the move, and we go into the conversations of the morning. Well, we're going to speak about relationships, marriages in particular, right? And the other parts of our communities that form a part of who we are outside of our marriages. And we all lean on our friends. It is part of being a human, and friendships are really a very healthy way to extend your community. And sometimes you bring in a late night vent as a married person, a quick loan sometimes from a friend, reassuring you're not crazy. These are everyday lifelines that good friendships have, right? But what happens when someone in a marriage starts turning to a friend, not just here and there occasionally, but constantly, emotionally, financially, and even spiritually in ways that their partner doesn't seem to or can't fulfill? Maybe it starts small, right? A friend is the first to hear about every argument that you have with your partner, your wife, or your husband. Then it becomes daily check-ins, secrets that are not shared with the spouse, but rather with the friend, or even financial support that quietly keeps the couple afloat. And over time, the friend becomes less of a sounding board and more of a crutch, while the marriage stands quietly in the background that's increasingly fragile. What happens then? What happens when one partner's primary source of support lives outside of the marriage? This is a conversation we're having this morning. And today we're joined by the host of That Husband podcast, storyteller and artist, Blaque Nubon. Thank you so much, Blaque, for your time. Good morning.
Hey, how are you guys doing?
Doing
Thanks for
great,
having me.
thank you.
Hey, we're
It's a
good,
pleasure
man.
to have
Sure.
you. Well, let's chat about that. Of course, it's important for us to have multi-dimensional relationships in our lives, and friendships are some of those important ones, right?
Yeah.
And so when someone gets married, there's, especially here in Africa, there a lot of advice that you get, right? Oh, your husband or your wife is now your friend. This is where you must go for your troubles. This should be the safest space that you have. But our friends still
Yeah.
continue to be safe spaces for us, even when we get married. Let's speak about that dynamic first. The importance of the friendships for both the partners outside of the marriage itself.
Yeah. Thanks for that question. I think it is crucial to one, just clarify what those relationships are going to look like. Because I think there's also just this unspoken rule when people get married, friends tend to distance themselves because they assume that the couple needs time alone to figure out their own dynamic as they start on this new journey. And so then the couple that just got married then see their friends slowly distance themselves, and then they think maybe there's something that went off, but there was just no clear communication from the couple or their friends as well. So nobody kind of initiated what this
Yeah.
new setup is going to look like. So I think it's always vital that before we even get married, one, you always have to have your friends involved in the process of you meeting somebody and deciding that you're going to marry them. Clarify what the dynamics are going to look like post the wedding before you even walk down the altar, so that everybody comes into this celebration knowing where they sit, what role they occupy, and what leeway is going to be needed to one, look after the health of the couple as they formulate this new relationship and start on this new chapter. But secondly, look after the health and the communication channels between them and their friends. So for me, I think the crucial thing is one, clarifying that. I've just noticed over the time of counseling people and even doing this podcast that the thing that's lacking there is people just go into this new chapter with a lot of assumptions. So get rid of the assumptions, lay things bare on the table, set the conversations of how this dynamic is going to look like. So I think that's crucial, number one. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, most of the time with that, it comes with the politics of being in marriage life, right? Because maybe we
Yeah.
were friends as singles, but now we married. The formation of what's happening in the relationship of a marriage is very different to how you relate to also your single friends, right? And there can be that fact, you know what, I'm going out with the girls tonight, baby. Hey, man, we're supposed to have supper.
Mm.
Remember, I arranged that a dinner with you. I've already booked. I think you forgot about that. No, baby, but the girls just had a light last minute arrangement. Come on, we'll do it another time. I'm always with you. So there can always be that type of conflict. And that's where our conversation is today, when you lean into more of your friends, that your relationship. How do you deal with that friction?
Yeah. So I think even there, there's a lot of married people that still live as singles, and I think the level of conversations that need to happen. One, as I said in the first question, there needs to be a clear communication between the couple and the friend group. But clearly, in this instance, the wife or the husband themselves haven't had a conversation individually to say, hey, self, this is who I used to be, and now I'm a husband or I'm a wife, and there's certain things that I need to put in place in order for me to walk faithfully in this role. And I would say, even in that moment when the mirror has cracked, you would rather choose your spouse because that's somebody that you've said publicly to even your friend group that this is somebody that you're forming a life with till death does you apart. And so you'd want to prioritize your spouse. Even if calendars were misaligned, you didn't communicate things properly, you would rather take the bullets and really just say to your friends, hey, listen, I made the blunder. I know that you guys just arrange this thing now. It's urgent, but I didn't communicate with my spouse. And so I'm going to sit this one out. Again, we can't just, as adults, think that we're not going to have any other opportunity to hang out with our friends. Friends will be there, but does this...
Blaque, are you still there? Okay, we can't seem to hear Blaque right now. Perhaps we need to reconnect to that particular line and get Blaque back on the line. It's some of the things are things that build up over time, and I'm really interested to find out from Blaque what happens then, right? When you have things that are subtly building up in the relationship itself to a point where, or the marriage itself, to a point where the friendship seems like a safer space than the marriage is at any particular time. So let's take a break. Hopefully we'll get Blaque on the line and continue this conversation. In the meantime, if you have any questions and comments on this particular conversation, head on over to our various social media platforms. Go to our live streams as well. On Facebook, we are simply Channel Africa, and on YouTube at Channel Africa 1 is where what you can search. And of course, you'll be able to see ourselves in the studio. Blaque is also on that live stream. You'll be able to engage with us there as well through the comment section at Channel Africa 1.
Darubini ya Afrika na I am Henry Shakif.
Raisi Yoweri Kaguta Museveni amezindua ilani ya chama tawala cha NRM ya kuanzia mwaka 2026 mpaka mwaka 2031. Taarifa hii ikoje?
Kweli kabisa, Rais Yoweri Kaguta Museveni muda mchache uliopita aliweza kuhutubia mkutano ambao uliohusisha wanachama wa Kongo na hali kadhalika wanachama waandamizi wa chama tawala cha NRM, yani National Resistance Movement.
Na katika kuzindua hiyo ilani yake ya chama tawala, pengine wana Uganda wamekuwa wana yapi ya kusema? Hisia zao zinaeleza nini haswa?
Kuna hisia tofauti. Kuna wale ambao wanamuunga mkono, wanaunga kauli ya Rais Museveni, lakini kuna wale ambao wanasema kwamba amekuwa akirudia mara kwa mara hayo matamshi.
Darubini ya Afrika kila Jumatatu hadi Ijumaa kuanzia saa 11 kamili hadi saa 12 kamili jioni majira ya Afrika ya Kati.
9 to 12 midday Central African Time. On the Move with Palesa and Benjamin Moshatama.
All right, we have Blaque Nubon back on the line chatting to us today about what happens when one partner's primary source of support lives outside of the marriage. Before we were interrupted there, Blaque, I wanted to ask you another question, right? Because sometimes we look at this, in the instance of the end goal, right? At the point where, one of the partners is seeking validation and, all of these things from someone outside of the marriage, being the friend in that instance. But there are things that build up over time in the marriage or the relationship itself that cause something like this to happen. What could those things be?
Yeah, I think the lines that get blurred between what I would define as vulnerability and transparency. And so if we're not clear as a couple on what those are, one, transparency is essentially saying that you're going to be honest, you're going to be open, and you're going to demonstrate values, principles about your character. But transparency is inviting somebody to come into your soul to change those things, to change your character, to have permission to move things around, to call out some of the wounds that you might even be behaving from. And so I think then what happens with couples is when that line is blurred and then one spouse is being transparent when they're supposed to be vulnerable, and then the other spouse who assumes that their spouse is being vulnerable then comes in and speaks in a way or acts in a way that says, you've given me permission that I want to change things here. And so when the other spouse then realizes, man, I didn't ask you to come in and change things, then they probably react in a way that is unhelpful, or even vice versa. And so I think once that crack happens, the next interaction that we're going to have, the one who was vulnerable and did not receive that vulnerability back, was actually pushed away when they thought they were being invited to come into a vulnerable space. Then we'll move carefully. They will tread in ways that obviously demonstrate that they have an injury, they have a limp. And so I think we need to clarify those lines. But I always say to couples, just by the definition of marriage, you come into a space that demands vulnerability from both of you. So never assume that your spouse is only asking you to be transparent, but they're always asking you to be vulnerable. And vulnerability is a commitment that is going to outplay itself over a long period of time. And that's so essential for marriage, because by definition, again, and design, marriages call these two people to be together until one of them dies and departs from this world. And so don't ever assume that your spouse is only just being transparent in moments. Assume vulnerability. It's rather safer to assume that and probably trail back when they'll say, I was only just being transparent there and not asking you to move the furniture or the contents in my soul. And so I think just clarify those things. We are supposed to be vulnerable, not just transparent as couples, but we should be transparent with our friends.
Sure.
All the time.
It gets tricky when some people don't understand that value system, right? And they probably will say, well, you know what? I'm not cheating on you, babe. That's what people usually use as a standard, right? They'll say, I'm faithful to you, right? But I got my friends and I've always had these friendships all my life. Don't you come now and change these important relationships in my life? I've always relied on this person for support. Yes, this person has always helped me financially. So I don't understand why you as my partner are now coming and breaking that type of depth that I have with this relationship. And I say depth in inverted commas. And at times when you're having these conversations of, babe, your friends are now taking over our relationship. What are we going to do? You're always out at the Chisanyama and I'm home waiting for you as your wife. Hey, you found me like this.
Yeah. So for me, that's, it's always problematic when a person says that. I'm probably going to be harsh here, but I think it does deserve just a harsh reality, a wake-up call, rather. So don't get married if you don't want to be changed. You should never walk down the aisle if your goal in life is to not want to be changed by your spouse. By definition, marriage is going to call you to change. By design, marriage is a coming of two universes colliding together, and there's going to be a wounding that happens. There's going to be calling out that happens. There's going to be we need to change certain patterns, how we behaved, who we hung out with, what parts of our souls we shared with other people, and we need to make sure that we reserve parts of us for this union that is being built. So I would say, if you don't want to be changed, then don't get married, stay single. But if you want to be married, you are saying to the person that you are calling and inviting into your life that you are willing, you are surrendering to be changed by them. And so how do we help a couple then who find themselves there? One, I would want to say to that particular spouse, whether it's the husband and the wife or the wife who doesn't want to be changed by their spouse, we need to do some deep introspection. We need to look at, again, what our commitment levels are, why we wanted to come into this thing, what is it that we define as marriage, and what we think the purpose of our marriage is. And there's probably a lot of things that we need to work out there. And that's why I'm saying, even when it comes to the issue of vulnerability or the question of vulnerability, that it is because of spouses who have blurred the lines between having to be transparent who are outside, who they don't spend all their life with, your friends, you only spend a couple of hours with them. Yes, you might chat with them over text or over the phone, but the person who sees you in your weakness, the person who sees your limitations, the person who sees your ambitions, your dreams, the successes when they're actually happening in the moment is the one that you've decided to spend the rest of your life with.
Sure.
So you need to clarify. I'll be transparent with my friends, and you need to do the deep work. And let me put it this way, of having to die to yourself. I have to die to myself for the sake of living a healthy life with my spouse. And she has to do the same thing in order for this thing to be healthy and for it to flourish. And part of that dying to self is saying to my homies, yo, listen, you guys carried me for a certain season, certain period of my life. Now I am surrendering myself to this woman that I've called to build a life with me. And in fact, you guys need to respect these boundaries. And there's things that I'm going to put in place to ensure that this life force really thrives and flourishes. Again, because if I show up as a healthy husband, man, you're gonna get an amazing friend.
Yeah.
But if I show up as a half-baked husband, man, I'm gonna bring all that weight of me fighting with my wife to you. And that's just the nature of our friendship after that. I'm gonna be asking you to always help me unpack stuff, but I'm never actually filled enough from my marriage to come pour into this friendship that we have. So I would say, man, do some deep work. If you're not willing to die to self, don't get married. If you are there, get used to dying to self. Yeah.
Blaque, a healthy person has to have multidimensional relationships. So we have to remember that, friendships themselves are very important in us being multidimensional as people. But in this particular instance that we're talking about, there can also be resentment then from the friend's perspective, right? If you're always going to the friend for support, for help, and they're like, okay, but what is this other person in your life there for? What are they doing there? Why are they there? But that can also cause a huge tension between your friends or friend and your husband and your wife. And then you have an issue because it seems now that you can't actually have or maintain that multidimensional, ways of those relationships. What happens in that instance now when either the friend starts resenting your partner or your partner starts resenting your friend?
Yeah. So the person that's stuck in the middle, always be careful of the language that you use of either parties. I need to be careful how I paint a picture of my wife to my friend. I need to be careful of how I paint a picture of my friend to my wife. So I need to be mindful of the language that I use, the narratives that I paint, the stories that I'm telling. Because again, I always say there's four sides to a story. There's my wife's side, there's my side, there's the person who brought in, who's the mediator, they have their interpretation, and then there's the truth. And so all these other three sides are trying to get to the truth. And so I need to say, as somebody who's stuck in the middle here, what is it about my friend that's truthful that I can share with my wife? And when things are not truthful, I need to posture myself and even put disclaimers to my wife to say, hey, I might not even be saying this stuff about my friend in a way that's helpful because I'm still processing it myself.
Sure.
So I don't want you to listen to me with the lens of thinking that I somehow think my friend is not a good person. And I need to do that same work about my wife to my friend. You know what I mean? So the person who's stuck in the middle, that's where the mirror always cracks, because we're always looking for sympathy on either side. So I come to my wife to complain about my friend, or I'm trying to use my friend to get away because I don't want to take accountability for my own flaws. And so then I paint a bad narrative of my friend. And so then the people that are on the other sides, they left with, all of this other residue that's negative because of our own words. So be mindful of how you speak about people in their absence to whichever party that you are currently involved with at that point, your wife or your friend. But then secondly, I think again, this whole thing of we just need to grow up and have a conversation, sit people down. And the reason why a lot of us struggle with it, especially spouses and people who are married, is because at some layer we might have, an idea. And if I'm being gracious here, we have a vision for our marriage, but then we don't have a vision of the kind of spouse that we want to become.
Sure.
Because as much as I want my marriage to be, healthy and thriving, etc., part of that vision being achieved is me having a personal goal, personal vision of how I'm going to become a husband that will add to this union of a marriage that is thriving.
Okay.
And I need to communicate that to my wife. I need to communicate that to my friends. And at any point where I deviate from that thing that I've communicated, both my wife and my friend can call me and hold me accountable and call me out and say, hey, bro, right now you're not behaving like the kind of husband that you said you want to be for this thriving and healthy marriage. And so then we can place those kind of boundaries by communicating that vision. And so then my friend knows what role they play. My wife knows what role she plays.
Sure.
And then they also should have access. I always say to my friends that if none of them have direct access to my wife, then they're not looking after me in a way that's healthy. They're not looking after my marriage, and me and my wife are not even empowered together as a couple to look after them as my friends.
Okay, Blaque, we have to cut it there, and we've run out of time. You've got a great podcast that does well on matters such as this. It's titled the Husband Podcast. Tell us a little bit about that. Where can people find your podcast, and where can people find you as we wrap it up?
Yeah, man. So it's called That Husband Podcast. It's just 3 words, That Husband Podcast. You can find it on YouTube or anywhere that you listen to podcasts, Spotify or anywhere else that Apple, anywhere you listen to podcasts. You just search That Husband Podcast or Husband Podcast and it will pop up. And then you can find us on Instagram and TikTok as well.
Fantastic. Thank you, Blaque. That was a great conversation. I think you brought a lot of wisdom in this one.
Thank you.
Well, that takes us to 9:31 Central African Time. What's your take on that? We want to get your views.